Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, a sneaky good addition for this Texas A&M program. Former Nebraska tight end Nate Boerkircher committing to Texas A&M. Now, the boys want to get into Nate Boerkircher. As people who watch a lot of Nebraska football, I think this could be a sneaky good addition for Texas A&M, especially considering how important the tight end spot is in the Coach Klein offense. But I also want to have a discussion regarding where Texas A&M goes from here in the transfer portal. It's been very clear priority number one for Mike Elko is build up this offensive skill talent. It just felt like it wasn't good enough in 2024. They've already started doing it with guys like Mario Craver and Micah Hudson, but it sounds like they're not done. And I want to talk about a few targets in that kind of category, and then also talk about a position group that to me might be a little bit of a concern heading into 2025. That's on the defensive line. And it's not that I don't think it's going to be a good unit, but I know how Mike Elko wants this program to look. He wants it to be a dominant unit. And you're losing guys like Shamar Stewart and Shamar Turner and Nick Scorton going to the NFL. I think there's talent in that room. I think you want there to be a little bit more proven depth in that room. So I want to talk about a few options I think Texas A&M could go after in that position group as well. Before we get into it, as always, to the Texas A&M fans, appreciate you guys. It's been a blast, really, since Mike Elko has taken over this program 12 months ago. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas continues to be amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Sounds like we're going to have a lot of commitments to break down over the next couple of days and weeks. Dill, you're the Nate Boerkircher guy, so I'm going to give you the T-box here. Sell the people on what Nate Boerkircher can bring to this Texas A&M offense.
I think it starts with kind of being that bridge to the Kiadi Armstrongs and the Tillers. Like the tight ends they're starting to recruit that you look at, you hope can be bigger piece of this offense.
Yeah.
It was like Trey Watson played solid, I guess, for Texas A&M. They didn't get a ton from that position. I don't think he had a ton of versatility in terms of where you could line him up. Kind of more of a traditional inline tight end could give you solid work. I look at Nate Boerkircher and maybe some of those young guys coming up. I think you might have a little bit more flexibility, and that's what I think you're looking for, or what Colin Klein's looking for. That's how he used guys at Texas or at Kansas State. I think Nate Boerkircher gives you a little more in terms of his ability to catch the ball, play as like more of a slot wide receiver at times, and do some other things.
But you also can inline block. This dude's a grizzled veteran, and I think he was a former walk-on. Dell. To me, I look at Nate Boerkircher and just say a really solid tight end that does give you that versatility to use him in a lot of different ways, which you said Coach Colin Klein wants to do. They are trying to get more dynamic. Do I think Nate Boerkircher comes in and gives you an All-American tight end season? No, I don't. But I think they're bringing in that talent from the high school recruiting trail. Like you said, kind of a nice bridge the gap to some really talented young tight ends that are coming up through this program. Let's talk about the pass catchers. And Dill, this is one of my number one wide receivers in the portal entirely. But it's coming down to three names that you're seeing a lot of, right? Casey Concepcion, Deuce Robinson, and Isaiah Horton. If you were to ask me to pick which wide receiver I would like to see Texas A&M go and get, it probably is Casey Concepcion because he's a little bit more of a proven commodity. You know, he's the same age as a guy like Deuce Robinson, but Deuce Robinson is a little bit more of a projection in terms of what he can be going into year three versus Casey Concepcion, bona fide, versatile, all-around weapon. And I look at the Texas A&M wide receiver room and say, look, it's super talented. We talked about this. I mean, you add Micah Hudson, former five-star wide receiver. You add Mario Craver, who was extremely impressive as a true freshman in the SEC at Mississippi State. Terry Bussey's in that room. Jerome Miles is coming in. That's 3 5-star wide receivers that you have in that wide receiver room, but it's kind of young, and it doesn't have a ton of proven production in that room. Doesn't get any more proven than Casey Concepcion. And because this Texas A&M wide receiver room to me is getting kind of so loaded, which is credit Mike Elko. I mean, we're talking about what wide receivers are going to step up 6 months ago. Now it's like you got a lot of different options. Casey Concepcion to me makes the most sense because he's so easy to get involved. He can play out on the boundary. He can play as a slot. He can line up in the backfield. Does it all because of that versatility. To me, he seems like the best fit for Texas.
And it lets them get creative. Again, we talked about when Colin Klein was at his best, he was being really creative. I feel like he was using guys in a lot of different ways. Again, he used the tight end position brilliantly at Kansas State, But even you think of a guy like Phillip Brooks, the way they were able to use him, he could
Yeah, it's a good
range,
comp. It's a
really,
good one.
really good route runner. Again, I think Casey Concepcion offers a little more in terms of his ability to get down the field because we've seen that from him, especially going back to the freshman year at NC State. But again, he's the type of guy that I think's really, really done well. And even you look like a guy like Deuce Vaughn, the running back, like even he had some of those skills that I feel like Casey Concepcion has. So again, just having guys who are a little bit more utility players, I think has been a benefit to Colin Klein's offense. I think Casey Concepcion's about as good of anyone.
Yeah, and then Deuce Robinson, this one sounds I'm not arguing not to get a guy like Deuce Robinson because you just don't see many Deuce Robinsons. These kind of guys don't grow on trees. Still developing as a wide receiver. Like you go back to his time at USC, it's this is a freaky big athlete that you just want to like remind him you're 6'6", 220. Like sometimes he doesn't play with that physicality that God blessed him with, but the upside is super big. My pushback for a guy like Deuce Robinson is, again, this is not me going to be upset if Texas A&M goes and lands Deuce Robinson, but it's you have Micah Hudson, you have Jerome Miles coming in, you have so much young potential in that room. I would rather go get a wide receiver that's done it, that's a proven commodity, which is kind of a nice segue, Dale, to Isaiah Horton, who I think is an absolute stud. And I think I don't really know what went on with the Miami Hurricanes there. They shouldn't have let this kid walk. I think you just go check the message boards for the Miami Hurricanes. Like they're not happy with Isaiah Horton leaving. This kid is 6'4", 205, started off his career the first couple of years as a little bit of a one-trick pony. You know, like I'm just a big body that can work vertically down the field. He has morphed into this true, I think, could be a wide receiver one, possession receiver. This one would make a ton of sense, especially to go along with some of these dynamic playmakers like Mario Craver or Terry Bussey, who might be on the shorter, smaller side, but ton of juice with the football in their hands. Big old body possession wide receiver that has a much bigger route tree than he did a couple of years ago. Isaiah Horton would be high on my list as well.
Because you want that proven guy to be able to attack down the field. That was one issue. Again, like obviously they gave the quarterback some heat at A&M, but they didn't have wide receivers I felt like were really good at winning over the top. Noah Thomas was able to do it here and there. That's a position or a skill set I think you really wouldn't mind seeing.
And especially with Texas A&M wanting to run the football as much as they do, bringing in those safeties and kind of opening up that deeper third. And you're right. Like as much as we've talked about the potential of a guy like Noah Thomas, it hasn't necessarily popped yet. And I'm not saying it doesn't pop in 2025. Like it very well could, but it hasn't yet. And like bringing a guy like Isaiah Horton, who's kind of shown he can do it, to me would make a lot of sense. I think any way you cut it, even if Texas A&M doesn't land another wide receiver, like to me, I look at it and say it's hard not to see Terry Bussey, Micah Hudson, Mario Craver, Jerome Miles coming in. It's hard for me to see a wide receiver that's not better than it was in 2024. Like I think they've successfully upgraded that position group. Now, the last position group to me that I'd like to see Texas A&M address is on the defensive line. And it's, again, to me, it's more, we need more bodies. We need more numbers. Here's a name that just hit the portal a couple of days ago. I think maybe a couple hours ago. I think it was yesterday afternoon. Patrick Payton-Dill. I don't know if I love the fit with Texas A&M just because I don't know if he's a Mike Elko guy, if we're being honest. He's not.
Well, my frankly issue is like, again, you can certainly question probably the level of intensity he's played with at times, for sure. But I also look like Cassius Howell, Rylan Kennedy, like you can kind of have those guys. You have your twitchy pass rush guys. Yep. Again, you're going to need to find a way to replace like what Turner and Scorton, like those bigger physical defensive ends are able to do. So that'd probably be where I'm looking. You know, that kid from, I think it's UTEP, one of the schools.
Yeah, you saw him too.
That dude's a fascinating guy. Like I look at the way he plays and his physicality from the edge spot, not the biggest guy in the world, but he's a really, really good player. I'm blanking.
True freshman. That's funny. Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that because I was about to put him on the list because I've heard good things, but I haven't gotten eyeballs on him yet. So I ended up not putting him on. That's funny. Texas guy too. True freshman last year, played over 400 snaps. I was buzzing his PFF grades. That's a really intriguing one. Here's another one that look, he's not going to give you the juice that Nick Gordon or Shamar Stewart gave you, but he's going to give you the heavy hands. Justice Boone, also familiarity with the Florida staff that's now at Texas A&M. This one to me would make a lot of sense. And it's one of those things where all those players you just listed off are the high upside guys. You know, the guys that are going to stuff the stat sheet if given the right opportunity. Justice Boone will not be that for you, but he's going to give you a guy that gives you probably 300 to 400 really solid snaps in 2025. It's not flashy, but it's a guy that is a proven commodity in the SEC. And what's interesting about him is they'll go back, would it be 18 months ago now, so I don't love it, but prior to the 2023 season, this kid was getting an insane amount of buzz coming out of Florida Gators fall camp. Then he tore his Achilles. Didn't really look back to form in 2024. Didn't look like the guy we were hearing all the buzz around prior to the 2023 season. What happens if, all right, we're now over a year removed from that injury? You get back to Justice Boone we were hearing about in the 2023 fall camp for Florida, which this staff has seen him. This one would make a little bit of sense too for me.
And they already kind of said they wanted that type of guy. Like Jack Piper and Justice Boone, I feel like are very similar players where, again, you kind of know what you're getting in terms of the pass rush. It's probably not going to be premier, decent in terms of being a little disruptive, can push pockets, can rush physically, but aren't wildly twitchy guys. But again, you look at rounding out the skill sets in this defensive end room, I don't think a Justice Boone would hurt. Like he'd be
these guys matter. You know, we want to talk about sacks and pass rush all the time. Well, how you get those sacks and how you get that pass rush going is winning on first and second down. Like creating those for second and third and longs. If you can do that with a guy like Justice Boone and say, all right, Cassius Howell, go pin your ears back and get after this guy. That's to me what it needs to look like for Texas A&M. They're trying to address it, right? They went after Jack Piper and they went after Will Helt. They went to LSU and Clemson respectfully. Justice Boone a little farther down your board, no doubt, but you got to pivot and add some depth where you can, in my opinion. We'll close it out there. Texas A&M got off to a really hot start, slower last couple of days. Make no mistake about it. I think there's a lot more commitments on the horizon. We'll break them down when they come in. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.